really quickly. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, in prior to free agency, we got one of our, I guess, we got a finally, John Collins got traded. So,
After 3 years, it's finally happened.
he finally got traded, man. He got traded to the Utah Jazz for Rudy Gay, who I honestly, even though we cover all of these games, it was a piece of me that had thought Rudy Gay had retired at the end of this season. But apparently, Rudy Gay is still alive and he is still playing basketball. And so he got traded for John Collins, which is a clear salary dump thing. And I think what you're really starting to see, Chance, is the ramifications of this new CBA coming into effect, right? Where teams are like, look, I don't care. Let's just get them off of our books and move forward, right?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think for them, it's a clear salary dump. Collins is making about 20 something million for the next 3 years. So they're clearly just trying to get off of that. I don't think Atlanta is done yet. So, yeah. And it's interesting. Rudy Gay, I've heard somebody else on another podcast, like, I didn't even realize this guy was still in the league. So, it's kind of funny. And it's all ramifications of the new CBA. One of the downsides to that is the Jazz actually had like $47 million in cap space going into the summer. But now with this trade, that drops them. So they were considered to be, potential players, but that's what's going to happen with the new CBA. You're going to have to unload assets to get teams to take on bad contracts. And now these teams that have a lot of cap space, instead of going out and signing a big free agent, I think you'll see a lot more of this where they'll be like, hey, trade us your bad contracts, but give us a pick or two to take on this bad money. And that's how we're going to allocate our cap space as opposed to signing free agents. I think with this new CBA, and it's already kind of been this way anyways, I think actual free agency signing is going to be a lot more rare as far as like big names. I think it's going to be a lot more like signing guys to big contracts and then trading them off, a year or two later. And so I think that's going to be a lot more prominent, especially with the new rules and restrictions. But for Atlanta, they were a luxury tax team. You don't want to be on that second apron, especially if you're not a contender and you're a team that's scraping by to get in the playoffs like Atlanta is. Like, that's the worst place to be, as a first round exit team that's paying in the luxury tax. Like, you just can't be there. If you're going to pay the luxury tax, you have to be a contender. So this is a clear move for them to get back down. They're not a salary cap team anymore per se, but they're still at least under the luxury tax. They get the full MLE and it opens up more flexibility. And I don't think they're done yet either.
Well, Chance, one thing that a lot of people forget is that cap space is great, but cap space at the end of the day is still just cap space. Like, if you don't really have any plans to spend that money on any major players at a certain point in time, like, you got to make deals. Like, the Utah Jazz were not going to sign anybody of John Collins' caliber this offseason through free agency. So this was a good way for them to acquire more talent, in which I'm kind of like concerned on how he fits on that team. However, look, this team is not in its final form. So you go out and get somebody like a John Collins, and hopefully you can revive his career and maybe flip him for pieces later, right? Because you know how it'll go. It'll be a team at the trade deadline that's in a situation like, we need one more piece to go for it.
Yep.
Let's go ahead.
Collins,
let's go ahead and trade draft picks.
Exactly. Like, Collins is a guy that could be valuable at the deadline, like you mentioned. And biggest thing for him, and I think we've talked about this before, is his finger injury that completely wrecked his shot. Like, he was a guy that could flapping down the court, rebound, finish around the rim, but also spread you out and hit threes. And that made him a decent fit next to Capella because he could spread the floor. And then he has this crazy hand injury. And if you haven't seen it, you can Google like John Collins finger, and it just looks absolutely insane. I don't even know how he plays basketball with this. And so you saw his shooting numbers tank. He was a 40% 3-point shooter. I think he was like 28% this past year. And it's basically to that injury. And so if there's any way he can find a way to either find some doctor that can fix his finger or figure out how to at least shoot at a decent level, he could be very valuable. But yeah, I'm with you. I think it's an interesting fit, especially when they just drafted Hendricks, who's another big man as well. But at the end of the day, like, you just want, assets. And if they can flip later on, you can always do that at the deadline as well.